If
You got Charlie on your shoulders.
I've got Charlie, yeah, he's eating my earring. My internet is so slow that you're seeing me about second after I move. But if anybody's seen from the pastor, I often put a little bit of humour in. And what I've said in this is when somebody says, I was only joking, that often or not, there's some truth in that joke.
Yeah.
They actually meant something by it. And one of them is, when you get to your wit's end, you'll find God lives there. And that's something that Elizabeth was saying in her prayers about people who are at their wit's end. And that actually, when you're at your wit's end, God is there. And I look back and I often realize that's why I'm where I am today. Amen to that.
Amen for that.
Amen to that. I often look back at my childhood days, and my daughter often says, well, you haven't grown up, Daddy. And I say, would you like me to? And she goes, absolutely not. So this next song is a children's song. I don't know if Jenny's done this one at all, or any of you, but this one's called One Basket, and obviously it's to do with the feeding of the 5,000 or the 100. I'm going to get Ian to play this one. This is a children's song that's called One Basket.
Thank you, Barbara.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Amen. We're going to the reading, but we're going to talk about the feeding of the 100. So if I had said to you, without reading the King's reading, and I said, we're going to talk about the feeding of the 100.
Come on.
I bet one of you may well either thought or said to me, don't you mean the 5,000? And I would say, no, I mean the 100. And you would then thought that I'd made a mistake. But I often, if not always, say the Old Testament is fulfilled in the New. Jesus knew the Old Testament and he fulfilled the Old Testament in the New, but he always went 1 mile more. So instead of 100, Jesus went 5,000. Beat that, said Jesus. So in those days, you see, the 100 were disciples of Elijah, and they would have all been men. But Jesus had men, women, children, and families, of which we need. Hello, Liam.
Can you see Liam?
Hello, Liam. Everyone wave at Liam. Hello, Liam.
Hi, Liam.
This
Hello,
is my
Liam.
great grandson.
Hello, Liam.
You.
Say hello to Justin. You see me? Anyway, so, and we need children and families today in church, don't we?
Yeah.
So the Old Testament had 100 disciples of Elijah, and Jesus had children and families of which we need in the church today. So what can we learn from that echoes from John's reading in King's reading? Well, the 100 belonged to the school of prophets. They were ministers, and they were ministers of Elisha rather, after Elijah was taken up into heaven in a fiery chariot, and he took over. Now, Patrick didn't go up to heaven in a fiery chariot, but I did take over from him. And I took over, and I bet you didn't guess that you would all become disciples, that you would all become trainee ministers. And I bet you don't even all know that now. We have several in our midst today. Bet you didn't know that. And it doesn't matter how old you are, because a lot of the people that were chosen were elderly, as well as some young ones like Timothy in the New Testament who were young. The text says that from a small village named Bel Shalita came to offer the first fruits of the barley harvest. So the main point of the first harvest was in the Old Testament. God commanded his people to give the first and best portions of the harvest as an offering. And that's in Exodus and Numbers and Chronicles, Deuteronomy, Numbers, and even the herds of the flock. You see, by giving first fruits as an offering to God, the Israelites acknowledged that all the harvest, in fact, everything they had, came from God and belonged to him. So they wouldn't keep the best for them. They would offer it up to God. So we don't keep the best. We give the best to God. So we give the best that we can give to God. We give what we have for God. We don't keep it to ourselves to make our lives better, to make us richer, or to make us higher or more important, but we give it up to God. The offering of the first fruits were likewise an expression of faith.
And then there's
Something else. The harvest of the rest of the crop would come later. So by giving up the best that we've got to God, we are ensured that God would provide for us, would give us provision for the rest of our lives. Because we've given up the best we've got for God, God would provide for the rest of our lives. But do we do that? Or do we keep the best for ourselves and give the threshing floor to God? And that's right. And as a church, we need to give the best that we can to God, and he will provide for the rest of us. And believe me, at the times when I was at my lowest and I was at my wit's end, I found God there. And there's sometimes where you have to give up everything to actually receive God. So you have to give up all of it to see God. Not just your first fruits, but everything. Barley was the earliest of the two grains of the harvest. So that's why they would give up barley, the feast of the first fruits. And this feast, and this is where the Old Testament comes into the New Testament, and I don't know if you know, but the feast happened on the Sunday after Passover. Does anybody know what day that is in the Christian calendar? Easter.
Easter, yeah.
So we can see how the Old Testament resounds in the New. Now we can start seeing the relevance of the Christian calendar from the Old Testament, because that's what happens. The Christian calendar resounds from the Old Testament, like everything else. When we see 25 loaves of bread, which was in the Old Testament reading in Kings, we mustn't see it, and this is what I was saying about the boy with the 5 loaves. You're thinking that's a lot for a young boy, but actually you mustn't see that as a loaf of bread you get from the supermarket. They were literally like little pita breads like that. Flat, unleavened, you know. So he'd got 5, but that was like 5 and 2 fishes. I mean, his fishes might have been little fishes, and 5 loaves, and that wouldn't have been a huge meal, but Elijah managed to make that in enough for 100 men. When they complained and said, this ain't going to be enough. And the boy said, this isn't going to be enough. And God made it enough. And then we think in our church life. And I've often thought, oh, I'm going to be a pastor of one of those big super churches. And I'm not. I like to have 21 small loaves, if I'm lucky. But that small loaves feed 5,000, can't you? With the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you could feed more than 5,000, many more than 5,000. So Elijah repeated his command, give them to the people to eat. And Jesus said the same thing. So the 100 were fed. So were the 5,000.
Come here, let's have a look. Oh, better.
If we look at Luke 24, he said to them, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets and the Psalms. He said, look, I'm in the Old Testament and it is going to be fulfilled. What was in the Old Testament, Jesus said, in the law of Moses, the prophets and Psalms, will be fulfilled in the new. And then he opened his mind, that he opened their minds, it said in verse 45 of Luke 24, 44 to 45. Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. And this is what we need to pray, because our bread, our sustenance is the Bible. And we must pray that the Lord would open the Bible. I was speaking to somebody, I've been speaking to somebody on Messenger, and they said, I've been reading the Bible and I can't understand a word of it. And I said, what version are you reading? He said, King James. I said, stop reading it. And he got back to me, what do you mean stop reading the Bible? I said, no, stop reading King James. I'll send you another version. And the thing about this is, somebody said to me once, you preach the Bible like you're preaching from a children's book. And I thought it was an insult. And then seconds after, I realized after he said, I can understand every word you say.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to speak in the language of the people, and it's King James. For anybody that feels the King James is the only Bible, then forgive me, because I'm not saying it's not, but we need to speak in today's language. And this is that's the bread of life. That is the bread of life. Then we see in Kings the raising of the dead son of the Shunammite woman. I don't know if anybody understands their Old Testament, but there was a raising of the son. Well, of course, we see that Jesus raised Jairus' daughter, and others. And Luke 8 lists women who supported the ministry of Jesus and his disciples. And we, in our Bible studies, have learned how many women of very old age gave birth. And we're talking in their 90s and 80s. And they gave birth. And of course, Elizabeth was getting on, wasn't she? So we see that, and we see a parallel to Abraham and Sarah. And of course, the theme of a miracle child being to a virgin birth of Jesus as well. And we see in the Old Testament that the son that was born was unfortunately died in his mother's arms of heat stroke. Elijah then sends one of his disciples to lay the staff on the body, and what happened was the staff didn't work. No. And the boy didn't come back to life. We see in the New Testament that the disciples tried to heal somebody when Jesus was on the Mount of Transfiguration. They tried to heal, but they couldn't. So here we see an echo in the Old Testament, and that happened in the New Testament as well. So we're seeing that all this is fulfilled in the New Testament. And it all shows a testifying of Jesus. But we move on. That David counted his soldiers. He counted his soldiers. He sinned by numbering the men of Israel. And why he sinned was by David doing so, he was putting his faith in the strength of his army rather than in the sufficient Lord. He numbered his army. It's not the resources of the crowd which Jesus fed that made the difference. This and following the bread of life discourse showed that the crowd got the wrong understanding of the miracle. Because Mark records that the disciples also missed it because they said, because we had not bought bread. In response, Jesus warned them to avoid the leavened bread of the Pharisees. Now that the Pharisees have bread, but he said, no, go and take the 5 loaves, small loaves of a barley, and I will show you that it's not the numbers of soldiers that you have or the numbers of whatever, it's what I can do. And so we look at my church of 21 if we're lucky, and I have to remember not to count my army, not to say that I have 5,000 in my congregation, a huge big band with a big screen and lights, a light show and dancers. I have a small amount of loaves, not big loaves, maybe grainy loaves made of the first barley, which was the rougher barley, maybe. I don't know. I'm not calling you rough, but we're small. We're not 5,000, but we mustn't count our army like David did. We have to say, Jesus, what are you going to do with our small congregation? What are you going to do? Now, I can tell you that our congregation in the Congregational Federation is held with high esteem, and we've been told that we box above our weight. You marvelous people. And there's the elephant in the room again. So Jesus fed 5,000 people as we finished the sermon with earthly bread in the springtime, some round around Passover. And a year later, we must remember that 1 year later, he would offer up his flesh as the true living bread, which we remember in the communion. He also provided the wine of the blood. And this bread would sustain the believer for eternity. We must believe even when the world is offended, most of the 5,000 would abandon him. So 5,000 came and 5,000 listened. But at the time of the cross, 1 year later, most of them abandoned him. And there was only a small group of people that were at the cross. And could it be us 21 if we're lucky? Are you going to go the whole mile? Stay till the end? Of course you are. You're here with me. The Rockin' Rev.
That's true.
Not the one that people would expect. I'm not in any way calling myself Jesus, but Jesus wasn't what people expected either, was he? I'm weak, but I am strong.
Justin, everybody loves you.
Well, I love you too.
Congregation and people outside the church all love you. And we will continue loving you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're all together. Charlie is Charlifying my sermon, by the way, as we speak.
Oh, he's not.
The cockatiel is eating my sermon. And this same Lord looks after us today, as I hope to look after you, whom I love, even at my weakness. He feeds the hungry with bread of this life and calls us to serve this bread to the world. What is bread we keep talking about? Is it a loaf? But he offers a better and eternal bread. And here's where I finished my sermon, 7 minutes too late. We need to urgently press the saving message of the gospel to the world, which is dying of spiritual famine. And we can see it. We can see it. Justina said to me, another decade or so, religion will be gone. No, it won't, because Daddy's going to be here in a decade. I'm not going anywhere. No, and we have got, you know, I say I'm religion and people look at me like I've gone out. But religion is a word, isn't it? I do faith. I do trust in the Lord. I do belief. Religion is a word that's been misused. But the prophet Amos tells us that in the last time there would be a famine, not of bread, but of the word of God. Amos said that in the Old Testament. And there is a famine. But there are Bibles everywhere. Some of them are free, you know. You know, the Gideons give free Bibles, don't they? And so do other people. And really, in this world where people pay thousands of pounds for a handbag, £20 for a Bible was quite reasonable, isn't it?
True.
No?
Well, at my confirmation, I received a white New Testament Bible.
And that's what we should be doing. We should be giving out the Bible. And I've had people ask me, as I said, for a Bible that they could understand. But I'm finishing. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, it says in the Bible. So we are to offer the bread to billions of people here on earth today. And we remember the Great Commission begins with the words, all authority is given to me in heaven and earth. God gives us the authority to preach the Bible, not just words, but in our actions. After feeding the 5,000, Jesus began towards his ministry to the Gentiles. He preached to the Jews first, and then he went to the Greeks also. So the only thing about preaching to churches is that you're preaching already to the converted. That's the trouble. We need to reach outside of the church. So Jesus preached to the Jews, and then he went outside of the Jews and went to the non-believers and preached to the non-believers. And we have to take our gospel out to the drug addicts, and the criminals and the alcoholics and the non-believers. We have to turn the violent into the caring and the loving and the gentle. We have to turn the untrusting into the trusting. We have to take the criminal to become the good person and the honest. That is our commission. That is our commission. Now it's our turn. Rather, we wage peace with the gospel of peace. We have to go out with peace and grace. And we remember that on the first Christmas night, the heavenly host cried out, peace on earth. The coming of Jesus was not a haphazard event, because through the failures of Israel, plan from the beginning. God had his plan from the beginning, even before time itself. So our church that may worry about how are we going to survive? We haven't had much money coming in for this year and a half. How are we going to pay our minister? How are we going to pay for when the electric bill comes in? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Stop counting our numbers and counting our pennies and count our blessings. Count our blessings and ask the Lord God to come in and send us out into the world and count the ones that we're going to bring salvation to, and not count our numbers and our pennies, but put our faith in God. So we have confidence in the promise of God, who foretold the coming of Jesus before the Holy Scriptures. This is how we should understand the passages like Alicia feeding the 100, that from 100 comes 5,000. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.